Hi everyone, my name is Kenzie Binkley, and I am going to be talking about an article called Hope as a Protective Factor Relations to Adverse Childhood Experiences, Delinquency, and Post Traumatic Stress Symptoms by Sparks and colleagues, made in 2021. Looking at this current study, the primary goal was to evaluate whether hope can be used as a protective factor for adolescents who have those history of ACEs. The study focused specifically on delinquent behavior and post-traumatic stress symptoms, both of which are believed to have a positive correlation with early life adversity, but we will be able to really see if that is the fact with the results later on in this presentation. The hypothesis was hope has protective effects for adolescents by reducing the strength of associations between ACEs, delinquency, and post-traumatic stress symptoms. Looking at some background, I know that we have talked about ACEs a lot, but I went ahead and included the definition being stressful or traumatic events that occur during childhood. We all know that ACEs are linked to long-term behavioral, mental, and physical health problems. I included a couple examples like mental health issues, delinquent behavior, doing poorly academically, but as we are aware and have talked about in class, there are numerous other things I could have included and numerous examples. The more ACEs an individual has, the higher the risk for those negative outcomes, which we've also talked about in class. Then looking at a specific definition for this study, I know hope universally defined can be kind of hard, but for the sake of this study, they defined it as seeking other pathways in which to achieve one's goals or the motivation to achieve specific goals. Looking at the methods, there was a random sample of about 1,236 adolescents from about 13 different schools. 49.6 were sixth graders and 52.4% were ninth graders, with that mean age being around 13 and a half years. 51.9% of the population was female, and something I found interesting was that 1/3 of the schools sampled were considered high-risk schools. Obviously, both the parents and the adolescents were provided the proper information and able to refuse the consent to participate. Looking at the measures, they looked at demographic information first, so their age, race, and gender. They then did the adverse childhood experiences scale, in which they had children answer yes or no. They got 1 point for their yeses, 0 for their nos. They would add up those points at the end. They did something similar with the hopelessness scale for children, with 0 being no, 1 being yes. The Delinquency National Youth Survey had them answer 0, as in they had never engaged in that behavior, or 4 being they had engaged in that behavior 10 or more times. And then the Child Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder Symptom Scale had them answering 0, as in they had not at all experienced those symptoms, or 3, as in they had experienced those symptoms 5 or more times per week. Looking at the results, as said earlier, ACEs were indeed positively associated with both delinquent behaviors and post-traumatic stress symptoms. It was also seen that hope was negatively associated with both delinquency and post-traumatic stress symptoms, meaning that having higher hope was actually linked to having a fewer number of those negative outcomes. It was also noted that higher levels of hope actually weakened the relationship between ACEs and delinquency, meaning that hope was indeed a moderator in this study. However, this moderating effect that was seen was only present within the sixth graders and not the ninth graders. This table here shows that ACEs have a positive effect on delinquency and post-traumatic stress symptoms, while hope has a negative effect. We could also see here that ACEs and hope was only significant for delinquency and not for post-traumatic stress symptoms. This graph here is a simple slopes analysis, in where you could see that the more ACEs yielded more delinquency, but that with high hope, it was at a much slower rate. Connecting this to class material, just like with anger, post-traumatic stress symptoms can be extremely overwhelming and feel very consuming and feel just like a lot in general due to the enhanced emotional response that occurs. And on top of that, enhanced fear learning and fear expression can lead adolescents into making delinquent choices because they are constantly operating in that fight or flight. Therefore, finding interventions for adolescents with ACEs or just individuals that have dealt with ACEs in general is extremely important. Leading into the implications with this newfound data, I hope that future studies can help explore the ability of hope, maybe through even specific interventions using hope as that moderator. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did, and I look forward to reading your responses. Thank you so much.